And here is my weather app, and let's open it up, and there you can see it automatically figured out what my current latitude and longitude was and pulled up the current weather report for me. And with a long press, it's going to read it.
The current temperature is 25. Current conditions mostly sunny, with a high near 40. West wind around 9 miles per hour. Tonight mostly cloudy, with a low around 31. Southwest wind 6 to 10 miles per hour.
And of course, this time we'll be able to enter in city and state, and it's automatically going to pull up that weather information. Okay, so now you know what we're going to be building in this tutorial, and I'm going to go through here, and it's really not that much information. Very first thing, though, that I noticed. For some odd reason, the National Weather Service flips the highs and lows depending on if we are currently at nighttime or daytime. So what I just did, just to keep everything really easy to understand, and everything you see here on the screen is available in a link underneath the video, so you can see all the blocks all in one place. So what I found out is, if indeed it is not night, we're going to have to pull our lows from the second index and our highs from the first index, and then do that for all the other ones. However, if we scroll down here, and if it is indeed nighttime, then we're going to pull the low from the first index and the high from the second index. So that's all I did there. I didn't see any reason to pull all this stuff out here. It would take forever. So that is basically what we needed to do, was flip-flop the highs and the lows and how we were pulling them from the JSON data, which is right here. Okay, so let's jump back over here and fix a couple other issues that came about. So as we scroll up inside of our block section, another thing that I noticed inside of initialize that I needed to change was, let's scroll down through here, and let's specifically look right here. Now, whenever I go to set up the location sensor and then get latitude and longitude data, what I do here is I say, well, if I don't have the latitude data, which is pretty much what this symbolizes, not equal to 0, well then I don't automatically pull the weather data up on the screen, and instead I just use the default data. Now what's neat about this app is you can just open it up and it automatically gets your current latitude and longitude, and it provides you with weather based off that latitude and longitude. However, in its current setup, what it's going to do instead is just pull up whatever the default settings are, which is up here. And if you are not interested in what Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's weather is, well then that's pretty worthless. So what I did was instead decided to go in here and change this information right here. So instead of just saying, well, I'm only going to go get the weather data if I have the current latitude, I instead want to say, if I don't have the current latitude data, well, I want to wait and I want to keep asking for it until I get it. So how do we replace this if-then statement that we have right here to instead say, you know what, we're not going to continue until I have the current latitude information? Well, it's not that hard. What I'm going to do instead is take this out of here, which is this if-then statement. It's still going to exist because I want to avoid any potential errors. And I also want to take out this part right here where we're going to be setting that data. And in its place, I'm going to put in a while loop. Basically, what a while loop is going to do is it's going to continue to ask for that information until it gets it. So I just have to put a condition inside of this. I'm going to go over into math and go and get my little equal sign right here and drop it in there. And then I'm going to come over to this guy right here, duplicate it, grab it, pull it over here, drop it right there. And I'm going to say, while it continues to be equal to 0, I am going to continue asking for new latitude and longitude data, which is exactly what I did there. So what I'm saying is, okay, is the latitude value equal to 0? Well, if it is, I want to ask the sensor for that latitude and longitude information. Then this is going to continue asking over and over and over again until the latitude value has an actual latitude value. Okay, so now I know whenever the app starts up, as you saw previously, it will have latitude data. But I'm going to keep this if-then statement inside of here just to verify that, because it doesn't hurt anything. Okay, so that guarantees when the app opens up, as long as the GPS is open and set for us to be able to use, that it is going to pop up proper latitude and longitude and weather information based off the person's current location. So that's fixed. So now what we want to do is fix the weather data procedure that we have. So let's just cycle down through this. And there you can see get weather data is right here. Another thing I want to do, just to verify before I ask for weather information, I want to verify that I have latitude values. Because remember, one of the goals of this tutorial is to allow the person in the search box to say I want weather information for Los Angeles, California, and pull it up. Well, before I get the weather data, I want to make sure that I have the latitude information for said city that they ask for. So I'm just going to wrap this in an if-then statement. Just go into control, if-then, grab that guy, drop it right there. And then I'm going to pull this out of here and then take this guy and drop it in there, move this out of the way. And then my condition here is going to be based off of whether the latitude value is equal to 0 or not. So I'm going to go into the math section, get this guy right here, drop him right there. And then I'm going to go into variables, get, drop this right here. And then we have to get latitude value. And if your App Inventor is slow, it's meant to be slow because we're doing a lot of things here. We're really pushing App Inventor to the limit here with this application we're making. So I want to say not equal to 0, and then take everything we had here and put it in the then part of it. And then we're going to put an else statement inside of here as well. And that else statement is going to tell us to get location data. So let's just come down here, grab this, and drop it right there. And then we'll come back to that later. Alright, so now what we need to do is figure out exactly how we are going to get location data. And I mentioned this previously. I'm going to be getting that information from Google, and here are all the component information we have here in this JSON data. And most specifically, what I want to get is, where's location? Need to scroll. This is the latitude and longitude data that I want to be able to get. And we're just going to be pulling that in using a URL just like before. So why don't we just scroll way down here and start building that guy. Okay, so here we are. Now what are we going to need to build our URL? We're going to need a whole bunch of variables. So let's go over into variables and initialize global. In the very beginning part of this, what I'm going to need is the beginning of the URL that I'm going to be pulling the data from. So I'm going to call this location URL beginning. And where am I going to get that from? Well, this is where I'm going to be pulling it from right here. So I'm going to come in here, grab all this, right up to the point where it has the city name right there. I don't want that because I'm going to be getting that from whenever the person types that information in the search box. Put a quote, paste it in there, hit enter, and then make sure you know that the HTTP part is already in there. You don't have to type that in. And there we go. So that's the beginning of our URL. Well, then we're going to have to put in the city name. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, up here they're going to be typing in the city name and then a territory afterwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to grab that city name and grab that territory or state or what have you and put that information inside of there. So the very next thing we're going to need is the city name variable. So initialize this, drop it right there, and I'm just going to call this city name. City name. And I don't know what the city name is, so I'm just going to put a default in there for now. Not really going to matter, and drop it right there. Well then, if we go back to our URL, we can see here after the city name that we have this quote here and this plus. So I'm going to copy that, jump back over into App Inventor, and create another variable, and initialize global name. And this is just going to be a junk field, so I'm just going to call this URL separation. Doesn't really matter what I call it, as long as I remember what it is. URL separation, and then inside of that, put that, and there we go. And then the next thing we need to do is put in the territory name, which is going to be where that person lives. Create another one, territory, and in here I'm going to put PA as a default again, and there we go. And then let's jump over inside of here again and see what else we need. Well, this is PA, the territory, and here we're going to grab this final part of the URL, jump back over inside of here, create another final variable, initialize global, and then this guy I'm going to call URL end. Quote, paste that in there, there we go. So now we have the beginnings of the URL that we're going to be pulling latitude and longitude data from. Now we're going to have to store all that information, and JSON data is all going to be stored inside of a list of lists. So we're going to create another one of these guys, and I am going to call it all location data. And it's a list, so we're going to go into the lists area right here and create an empty list. And there we go. We are also going to be grabbing the city and the state from the search box inside of our app, and I want to use that as a list as well. So it's going to be a list that's going to contain city and territory or city and state. So I just create another variable, call this location list. Like I said, it's going to be a list as well, so let's just duplicate this and create an empty list. And then we're also finally going to need a variable that's going to contain the city and state that is going to be pulled from the search box in our app. and then we're going to dissect that, as you're going to see here in 1 second. I'm just going to call this location complete. And because we're going to be filling that with information, I'm just going to make it empty. And there we are. Okay, so now that I got all my variables out of the way, what I need to do is figure out how the search button is going to work. So just come in here. Where is our search button? There it is. Click on search button. And we're going to say when the search button is clicked, well, we want to do certain things. And basically what we want to do is we want to grab information from the search box, which is going to be the city and state, this guy right here. And we want to separate it into city and states in a list, and then use that with our URL to pull in latitude and longitude for that specific area. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to store the city and the state name inside of this variable right here. So set, and then we want to go inside of here to city text box, and we want to get whatever text is currently stored inside of that guy. Grab that and drop it right there. Then we want to verify that there actually is city and state information in there, and if they didn't enter any information, we want to protect from any type of errors. So we're going to go and get ourselves an if statement. Anytime we want to do one thing under a certain condition or another thing under another condition, we use if or then. And we just want to verify that it's not equal to, grab this guy right here, drop it right there. And that came from the logic section right there. Again, we're going to use location complete. So we're going to say if location complete, which we just set with that information there, is not equal to, and then we're going to have nothing. So if it actually contains information, well then we want to separate the city from the state. So come up here and get this guy and set. Drop it right there. Now we were requiring the user to separate their city and their territory or state name with a comma, and I'm going to have error messages pop up if they do not follow that rule. So what I want to do is split the city and state based off the comma. To do that, I'm going to go into text, and I'm going to say split at first. Come over here. Drop it right there. I'm going to get location complete, which is going to be city and state. There's the text. Drop it in there. And then I'm going to separate it based off of the comma. So I'll just put a comma in there. Drop it right there, and there we go. So now we have a list that's going to have city and state inside of it. Now what I want to do is verify that they put in a city and a state, and if they didn't, then we're going to throw up errors and make sure that they go and fix that. So to do that, we got to go into control, another if-then statement, and here we want to verify that the list has a city and state, or that it has at least 2 values inside of it. So we're going to put that there, and then we're going to say greater than or equal to, like that. And we're going to go length of list right there, and then get our location list and verify that it has a city and state inside of it. Up here, math, and get a number, and then put 2 here. Okay, so now that we know we have a city and state, what we want to do is trim off any excess spaces, and also, let's come inside of here, if we would want to put in another city with, say, multiple names inside of it. So if we go, for example, Penn, well, you're going to have to put in a quote followed by 20. And there we go. You saw that I changed that right there for any spaces. And there you can see I pulled up latitude and longitude data. So what we need to do is go in here and replace any spaces in the city or territory or state names with a % followed by 20. So I'm going to go and get my city name and my state name. Let's see here. There's city name. And I'm going to get set specifically, and I'm going to do the same thing for territory. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room. I just put in that I want to be able to set the city and the territory name, and then I'm going to be messing around with text again. So in this situation, I just want to replace all spaces with a % followed by 20. Let's come through here, replace all text, segment replacement, grab that, drag it up here, drop it right there. And I also want to trim any excess white space before the city name or after the city name. So I can do that is use another text tool called trim. There's trim, and that's exactly what it does. So take that, throw that right there. All right. Now remember, the city is in index 1 for our location list. So we can just grab this guy, location list, drop it right there, and then we're going to go into the specific list part and say that we want to select list item and we want to specify an index. Grab this. This is our list, and the specific index that we want is 1. So that's how we'll be able to get our city name. And there we are. All right, now let's get back to replacing our spaces with %20. So put a quote and a space. Sometimes this doesn't take inside of App Inventor. So if you have any problems where it's not converting the spaces into %20, this is where you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to go in there and type the space again. It only happens sometimes, but just wanted to make you aware that sometimes it doesn't take that space, and it considers it a blank space. duplicate this, and then replace it with %20. And there we go. And then we're going to have to do the same thing for our territory or our state. So we might as well just duplicate this, drag it down here. And then of course our state or territory is going to go into the second index to get that information. And there we are. Now everything's set up. Now that we're in this position, we're going to be able to say, hey, go get our location data. And we might as well stop beating around the bush and just go and create that procedure so that we can make everything else work. So we'll go over here to procedures, and we're going to create a new one. And like I said, it's called get location data, and it is going to use the complete URL that I have up here. So we'll scroll up here, and it's going to store information in a variable called complete URL, which I have to create here. Complete URL. And it's just going to have junk information in it right now in the beginning. And then we're going to set it over inside of this procedure. Now, of course, the URL that we're going to be using to grab the latitude and longitude information is going to require multiple lines. So that means we got to go into text. We're going to get ourselves a join, and we're going to need 5 parts to create our URL. So for our join, we're going to grab some extra spaces. So drop it in there. Now we need to go and grab our URL data, so we're going to get location right here, and we're going to go get, drag that there, city name, get that as well, URL separation, territory name, and then just grab it and drag it over here. And then the final part is URL end. And there we go. We have the beginning of our URL, the city name, the separator, the territory, and the end of the URL. Now that we have created that, what we need to do is go and get our web component and call for that information. Now, it's very important to have more than one web component if you're going to be pulling data from multiple sources. So I have web component 1 for pulling weather data and web 2 for pulling latitude and longitude. And of course here we're going to have to define our URL that we just put here. So set URL, drag it, drop it right there. And there it is. And then this is the URL that we're going to be using with it. And then after we have that set, we're going to go in here again and say, hey, go get that information. And I like to log this information as well, so I'm going to use a notifier here. And I'm just going to say log info, and this is just going to log it on the Android device. And I do this for testing purposes, but you should also do this if you want to error check anything. And I'm going to need to do a join. So let's go up here and get text, join. And whenever I'm putting any type of information inside of a logs for error checking, I like to use capital letters so things stand out. So I'm going to put location, URL, like that, uppercase letters. And then if we have any type of error, I'll be able to quickly go in here and figure out exactly where it is. And then I'm just going to get the complete URL we'll be calling from. And I do this because the way that these URLs are structured could change. Anything could happen. So that's the reason why I got that inside of there. Alright, so get location data is all fixed up. So why don't we go back up to our search box here and finish that guy up. And there it is, there's our search button. So let's get this guy, move him out of the way, and get the get location data and move it out of the way so that we have room. And now inside of this, right after I get my city name and my territory name, I'm going to be able to call that get location data, and I'm going to drop it right there. And now what I want to do is verify that I have latitude and longitude and they're not zeros. And if they are not, then I want to get the weather data after I get this. So again, that means that I need to go and get myself an if-then statement. Drag this, drop it right there. Math section, I want to check for not equal to 0. I want to go and get the latitude value. Again, I'm just doing this to hold up any errors that might come. Look for latitude value specifically here, and there it is. I want to verify that it's not equal to 0, and there we go. And then if it's not equal to 0, I want to call for the weather information to update. Get weather data and drop it right there. And now just to provide some dialog boxes if certain errors occur. If the length of my list is not greater than or equal to 2, well then I want to handle that. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put an else statement inside of this. Else. And I'm also going to want to put an else statement here if there is nothing inside of there for city and state and they click on the search button. There that is. Now I prefer to use dialog boxes instead of alerts because alerts are kind of hard to read, but just to mix things up here, of course you can come in here and change this on your own. I'm also going to go into notifier and go to show alert, drop one of those right there, and then put another alert right here. Here I can say enter city followed by state, provenance, territory, etc. Whatever. And that'll be a little error message that pops up. And then down here, because I require them to use commas to separate them, enter city and territory separated by a comma. And there we go. We handled all those errors. Now remember, we had another guy hanging out up here that was waiting for the ability to call get location data. and we're not done with get location data yet, and that was get weather data, which we just called, and there that is. This is get weather data. Well, I guess I should scroll up a little bit more. There we go. Get weather data. Go over into procedures, get location data, and drop it right there. And what I'm saying here again is if the latitude value is not equal to 0, then I'm going to build this URL. Otherwise, I'm going to call get location data so that I can get that latitude information. Okay, back down to the bottom. And the only other things I have to handle here are text-to-speech and actually getting my information, that JSON data for latitude and longitude. Now how I'm going to do that is here I am making a request over here to get our JSON data. And here is the URL that I'm supplying. Now after it gets it, it's going to return it, just as we saw in the last part of the tutorial. So we're going to have to catch that new information. So to do so, we're going to go into Web 2, this guy right here, the guy that's getting our information, and specifically go to got text, which is our JSON data. And we just need to verify a couple things, which means if then statements again. Drag that, drop it right there. First thing we want to do is verify that our response code is equal to 200, which means that our information got passed back to us properly. So go back into math, drag this down here, and verify that the response code, this guy, get response code, is equal to 200, which means we got our information that we wanted. Just duplicate this, drag it down there, put 200 inside of there, and there we go. And if we did get that information, then we want to set all location data and store all of the information from that web page into our variable called all location data. You just come up here, all location data, this guy right here, set, get it, drop it right there. Then to pull our JSON data, we're going to go into Web 2 again, JSON text to code, drop this right here, and then response content is going to have all of that data. So then just go to response content and drop that right there. Okay, so now that we have all that data, we need to figure out how it is sorted. So what we're going to need to do is store the latitude and longitude value in variables. We already have those variables, so let's just go set, get 2 sets and drop them inside of here. Actually, let's just get 1 for now. And specifically, we're going to have latitude value inside of this. So let's go find that. There's latitude value. Then we're going to have a bunch of select list items. So let's go and take a look at that raw data that we get from Google. Okay, so this is the raw data that we get from Google, and basically, just like before, we need to cycle through this and find the information we need. Okay, so as we look at this, there are 2 big pieces of information. Results, which is ultimately going to contain our latitude and longitude data. And then let's scroll down here. There's another one called status OK. Well, that means, and they're separated with commas. That's how everything is set up inside of this JSON. Alright, so that means whenever we're pulling in our latitude and longitude data, we're going to want to get results and not status. So there's 2 possible things we can grab first, results or status. So I'm going to grab results. So that means I am going to put down a big number 1 right there. Then what I want to do is I want to get address components, but I do not want to get results. So that is an option of either 1 or 2. Address components and all this other data inside of here. Remember, everything's structured as a list inside of a list. So to get that, I am going to need a 2. Not results, but all of this data right here. Okay? Did this in the last part of the tutorial. Then I want to specifically jump inside of this block being the first component, which means that that is going to be a number 1. So that is going to give me all my list items inside of here. Then I specifically, out of all these different guys, address components is actually, there's actually 4 items in this list. First one's going to be address components, and you can see where address components end by looking for this bracket right here followed by a comma. So the first one's going to be address components, which I have no interest in at all. And then if we cycle through here and look for a closing bracket and a comma, you can see one right here. There is the end of address components. So the next item in our list is formatted address. So there's currently 2 list items inside of here. So what we want is geometry. And if you can see here, there's a comma, there's all this information, and there's another comma. So that's the end of formatted address, which means we want the 3rd item in the list, which is geometry. So there is 3. And this is us working towards getting our latitude and longitude information. Now, do I want the word geometry or do I want bounds, which is going to contain my location data? This is where I want to get to ultimately. No, I want bounds. So that means I want the second item in our list here. Then we can see bounds, because this curly bracket is going to end down here. And I want location, this guy right here, which is the most specific latitude and longitude. So I want the second item in our list. So that's going to get me down into location. Now, do I want the word location or do I want the latitude and longitude? I want the latitude and longitude. So there is another second drilling down into the data. I then want latitude and longitude data, which is going to be a number 1. And then more specifically, I want this guy right here, which means that that is going to be the second option. So that is how we worked through here. I did this previously with a little bit less complicated JSON data. Hopefully you're getting it. If you didn't, watch the previous part of the tutorial. It's something that once you get it forever, but there is a little bit of a learning curve to figure out how to cycle through all these things. You're basically just looking for changing brackets and commas to decide how this information is stored. So now that we have all these numbers, I'm going to jump back over into the block section and grab latitude and longitude. Okay, so here we are, and all I'm going to do is I wrote all those numbers down on a piece of paper, so I'm going to select those different list items inside of here. That means I need to go into lists, select list item list, and then I'm going to put a whole bunch of indexes inside of here. And let me tell you, there are a bunch of them. So I'm going to need a total of 9 of these guys. So just duplicate them, and duplicate that to make 6, and duplicate this to make 9. Okay, so that's going to allow us to cycle through all that JSON data. And then the final thing is going to be all location data, which is stored inside of here, way down inside of here. So that's pretty much the whole entire document. So I'll go into variables, get, drop that right there. And then this is going to be all location data. And there we go. Then I just have to put all these numbers inside of here. So to grab all of the data, we're going to put index 1 inside of here. There we go. And then I'm just going to put in all those numbers that I was writing previously. This is the second one. I don't want the word result. I want the actual data that was stored inside of it. There's the list items, of which latitude and longitude were just part. And then the third, which is geometry. This is going to be the bounds part. And I don't need another 2. Scroll over here so we can see a little bit better. And then that's a 1. Okay, so I have all that. I'll be able to get my latitude information. And now I just need to get my longitude information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this because they're right next to each other. So I just have to only change one index to get the right information. So I'm just going to duplicate that, drop it right there, and then change this from latitude to longitude. There's longitude value. There you go. And then the only thing I need to do is change this from a 1 to a 2. That's going to get me longitude instead of latitude. And there we go. So I got all that all set up. The only other thing left to do here is to set up a notifier if there was some type of error that occurred whenever we were pulling all this information inside. So I'm just going to come up here and put in an else statement, right like that. Cycle down here, put in a notifier, and let's just do a show alert again. And let's just say error occurred retrieving data. And there we go. And the only other thing left to do is to handle text-to-speech so it reads out our weather report to us, so everything's pretty much hands-free. This is extremely easy to do. What I'm going to do is just go with the search button and say that if they use a long press, right like this, drag this right here, that I want to use text-to-speech. So I have text-to-speech here somewhere. There it is. And just go to speak. And then, of course, I'm going to need a join because I'm going to be saying more than one thing. Go up into text. Get a join, drag it, drop it right here. And then I could start it off by saying the current temperature is, put a space, otherwise it could get confused. Drop that right there. And let's say that we need 6 of these join areas for us to put our information inside of. Grab a couple more of these. And then we have to actually get our information. So the very first thing I want to do is get our current temperature. That's over here, current temp label. And there's that. Drag it here, drop it right there. Put in current conditions. Over here, look for current weather report label. Get the text from that. And then let's say that I want to also say whatever the weather is going to be for the next time period. Cycle through here. I want to say whatever that is, which is either going to be tonight or this afternoon or whatever it's going to be. That's going to be a next weather period label. Drop that right there. And then let's say that we want the description. Next weather period, description label. And just that easy, you just added the ability to do hands-free weather reporting. So there we are. That is the weather app. It's done. It's finished. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope somebody out there actually watched all these videos. Please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.